The films and TV series that we love, that we personally identify with, have been going through a bit of a rough spell lately. What I mean to say is, your favorite fandom is on fire. Opinions are heated, tempers are running high. In message boards and comment sections and social media posts, there are lamentations that once beloved properties like Harry Potter or Star Wars or Star Trek are going off the rails. That they are betraying our childhoods or sullying the visions of filmmakers and television producers and authors who would be our messiahs. I mean, is nothing sacred anymore? But it didn't used to be this way, right? And if that's true, then how did we get to this moment? What does this moment even mean? And is there anything that can be done to return to the glory days when our favorite thing was untarnished by debate, opinion, and politics? What follows is a theory for defining the authentic fan, and the fan's unfortunate shadow self, the toxic fan, a hallmark of the fandoms of our age. Follow along, and let's see if we can figure this whole thing out. There was a time when to declare yourself a Star Trek fan was to murder your social life. Star Wars enthusiasts or Lord of the Rings devotees kept their love on the DL, hidden away, secret.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
Maybe you could speak Elvish? Better keep that to yourself if you ever wanted to, I don't know, get invited to a party or go on a date. All things geeky or nerdy were on the subcultural fringes. This was decades before the San Diego Comic-Con would make millions of dollars every year, before all of Hollywood's A-list celebrities would scramble over each other to be in a comic book movie.
Yeah.
And certainly before America's favorite sitcom would celebrate geekiness to the pleasure of millions of viewers.
Why don't you ask Scotty to beam you up?
Ugh, you've got poor taste, America. In these early days, fandom was private, small, individual. It did collect into groups, but the connection was slow in the pre-internet age. Fan clubs operated by snail mail. Conventions were also small, or too few and far between, and likely in a city too far away. Patience was the key to being a fan, and the effects of fan synergy were minuscule. I mean, ticket sales and Nielsen ratings were always healthy, but in all other matters, being a fan of a geeky property was decidedly not a mainstream activity. But if loving a sci-fi or fantasy property was so isolating, then what was driving fandom at all? How do these now gigantic properties even survive? So the crucial thing about fandom is this. Fans are attracted to what they like because it resonates with them on a personal level. Fans make connections with a character, or a show, or a comic book story because, like any good story, it informs us of our own situations in life, somehow describing our own lived reality. It feels good to know that Luke Skywalker is a regular moisture farmhand, just like us.
He died about the same time as your father.
You knew my father?
I told you to forget it.
That Peter Parker, despite all the web slinging, is just a teenager who lacks confidence.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
That James Kirk is a normal kid from Iowa who just decided to get a job in space travel.
Armed photons, prepare to fire on the Klingon warbirds.
Yes, sir. Jim, their shields are still up.
Are they?
No, they're not.
And how these unexceptional people manage exceptional circumstances offers a guide. Life lessons on what to do when our own lives touch the exceptional or the troubling. There is power in seeing someone like us on a screen or on a page. Let's face it, more of us are like Peter Parker than we'd like to admit. And there's an attraction to the central philosophies of these properties too. Properly negotiating the line between good and evil. Knowing what to do when a great responsibility falls your way, or how to talk to a computer when it gets out of line, are all important life lessons.
Everything that is in error must be sterilized.
There are no exceptions.
All this to say that when we become a fan of something, it's because we're willing to adopt that property as a marker of our personal identity, an outward expression of who we are in the world. This may seem both an oversimplification and completely obvious. You see, Americans have for more than a century consumed things and media based solely on how it makes us feel. I like it or I don't like it have become the sole rationale for choosing a table, a jacket, a religious denomination, a house, and especially a TV show or film. And there is a particular understanding of personal identity driving this behavior. We tend to think of our inner emotional selves as our most authentic and true selves. It is that inner self that distinguishes us from others, that most needs to be expressed. And in modern-day America, the pursuit of authenticity through realizing one's felt preferences can be most directly expressed through consumption. This may seem obvious to you, dear Westerner, but this is a specific cultural context not found everywhere on the planet. In other cultures, the inner lives of people aren't always considered important or trustworthy or authentic, or are sometimes subsumed by social responsibilities in other arenas, like religion. In the United States, we choose to buy things and watch media that we feel defines us, and that's how we express our inner selves. So when someone tells you that they are hot for Spock because of his emotional coolness, they are simultaneously telling you something about themselves and announcing to the world an ingredient of their personal identity. Saying, "I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan," is another expression of an inner self. In the fandoms of yesteryear, the realization that you connected with a particular story or character was a personal discovery, something you found on your own, making the discovery an important personal milestone. But what happens when this dynamic is applied to an internet-enabled society? When more fans than anyone can count suddenly come into contact with each other? Does the specialness of our love for Jim Kirk or Spider-Man diminish when we realize how we feel about them isn't unique? Like the arrival of the printing press in Europe, the internet is turning whole industries upside down, sowing chaos throughout society and, through mass empowerment, rewriting the political rules of governance all over the world.
Well, that's right, TJ. I mean, social media has played such an integral role in getting protesters out into the streets and demonstrating in Egypt the last several days.
The country's president took to video messaging to get his view across.
We will take all the necessary steps by standing tall.
When the internet is down, we will use this feature, use the Bluetooth to connect around
everyone
here.
Who's in the area.
Mustafa Naim says he had no idea his Facebook call for protests in Kiev's Independence Square would help spark months of demonstrations.
An estimated 3.5 million people in cities around the country and the world took part in the Women's March, protesting the Trump agenda in what may have been the largest collective protest in American history.
The internet is an agent of disruption. What started out as a cool way to avoid buying stamps has enabled a new type of revolution and forced companies to submit to the whims of their customers more quickly and more completely than ever before. It was inevitable that this new disruptive power would find its way into fandom. Along with reducing the sense of isolation and giving fans a chance to find each other, the internet is also the scene of another tumultuous dynamic, a kind of intra-fandom group competition. A contest of opinions that, at its heart, is about defining the authentic fan. Competition for authenticity is now occurring in every fandom everywhere. Hordes of fans are now able to instantaneously compare opinions, likes, dislikes, and beefs with each other, something that would have happened only on a limited basis in the pre-internet age. This process feels loud, raw, and sometimes very antagonistic. We even have a new aphorism that partly fits the new online context of the fandom. Don't read the comments. Prudent advice in this age. The quaint fan debates of yesteryear, Kirk versus Picard, hand shot first, who is the best Batman, have been eclipsed by today's raging debates on social media and elsewhere online. This immediacy makes fandom feel even more personal and high stakes. If people do have a personal investment with their chosen fandom, If their love of an IP is an expression of their identity, then being a fan in this raucous new age involves, in some sense, a personal fight for the defense of the self. However, while the internet may be driving this new dimension for fandoms, it isn't a new phenomenon. Let me show you something. The Council of Nicaea in the year 325. This was an important moment for early Christianity. The council's main aim was to find consensus on the nature and organization of their new religion. You see, before this council, early Christians believed all sorts of things. For example, a sect called the Adamites claimed to have reclaimed the lost innocence of Adam, the first man created by the Christian God. To celebrate this rediscovery, Adamites attended church service in the nude. Another group, the Ebionites, claimed that Jesus of Nazareth was indeed the son of the Christian God and the Messiah, but they rejected his divinity and the story of his virgin birth. The Marcionites believed that Jesus was the savior of humanity sent by God, but only the New Testament God. They regarded the God of the Old Testament to be a separate, lesser God. It took the Council of Nicaea to officially disclaim the divergent branches of this new faith, to establish a common structure and order. But it wasn't easy. Disagreements were difficult to reconcile. Even hundreds of years after the council's efforts, new groups with new interpretations would struggle against the established faith. German theologian Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation he began in the 16th century illustrates that the group's struggle for authenticity and interpretation would continue. It is almost as if the more people you have in your group, the more likely it is that there will be divergent opinions about what the group is and what the group means to the individual. So, in a sense, the online intergroup competition in fandoms, the shouting matches over who is the more authentic fan or what property is turning away from the, quote, true fan, isn't anything new. The internet has allowed, for maybe the first time, collective group dynamics we've seen for centuries in religious groups or national identity politics to play out with lightning speed inside the fan community. Martin Luther's revolt against Catholicism has, on some level, a similar feel as the various opinion pieces or boycotts that claim that franchise X or franchise Y has lost its way. So, we've established that the internet is doing a new thing to our favorite fandoms, in spilling together into the social spaces of the web all the known opinions about what makes an authentic fan or an authentic franchise. And we've noted that the kind of struggles for interpretation and authenticity playing out in fandoms now are very old processes that happen inside a group with a shared identity. But perhaps the most important thing we need to discuss here is that some particularly vehement strands of fan interpretation, emboldened by the disruptive nature of the internet, have grown to poison fan discourse online. I am talking about toxic fandom. And by toxic fandom, I mean support for an intellectual property that manifests as threats or harm toward other fans not considered authentic enough. Viewed from within a particular fandom, it might appear that only a minority of fans are toxic, that harmful negativity is a fluke or a one-time event. However, broadening out, we begin to see a much larger trend crossing multiple fandoms. For example, in 2018, a vocal minority of fans, in perhaps a coordinated effort, subjected Star Wars actress Kelly Marie Tran to a barrage of racist and sexist comments until the actress eventually deleted the content from her Instagram account. When John Boyega appeared in the trailer for Star Wars The Force Awakens in 2015 wearing a stormtrooper uniform, there was a backlash centered around his race. Racially motivated criticisms began trending under the hashtag #BoycottStarWars7. The Ghostbusters reboot backlash was particularly vitriolic, with a minority of fans upset that women were playing the lead roles once held by men. In a stage play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, a decision to cast a black actress as Hermione Granger led to strong, racially charged reactions. There was hateful rhetoric surrounding Star Trek Discovery's main character, also a person of color, and the general diversity of that cast, something Star Trek is ironically known for. And a huge volume of sexist rhetoric was generated at the announcement that Jodie Whittaker would be cast as the first female Doctor in the Doctor Who universe. All of these examples, and there are plenty more, have two elements in common. Namely, the various backlashes are always a vocal minority whose opinions are amplified by the internet, and the most vocal backlashes are invariably sexist or racist. Step back even further, and we can see an emboldening of similar attitudes across society, touching on many different spheres of life. That emboldening is happening for a few reasons. Primarily, the ability to become relatively anonymous online certainly gives some people a freedom to express unpopular opinions without the social repercussions they might experience in face-to-face conversations. This kind of anonymity, called de-individuation, has a particular effect on group dynamics as well, pushing conversations and positions to more extreme, more polarized positions. This effect plays out in places far beyond fandom. There is a bit of a feedback loop to this too. The more we see a position we agree with represented in the world, the more likely we might be to speak out on it, and the louder, more opinionated, more vitriolic we might be as well. In every one of the previously mentioned backlashes, the racially or sexually charged comments are mixed with personal attacks and occasionally death threats. Though it's easy to dismiss toxic fans as simply terrible people, in context, we can also see toxicity as a result of a kind of ripple effect. Fandom as a component of identity, defense of the fandom as a defense of the self, negativity as a result of a threat to the self, negative emotions made anonymous and given the most powerful megaphone the world has ever known, which increases vitriol on all sides. Much like the events surrounding the arrival of the printing press in Europe, the internet genie cannot be put back in the digital bottle. As long as we have an internet, and it will be with us for a long, long time, we will have to find a way to cope with the effect the internet has on speech and on group identity. The polarization, the de-individuation, the intergroup competition will be a part of our favorite fandoms from now on. And whatever unpopular opinions there are currently floating around in our culture, those opinions will eventually surface in discussions within our fandoms. Right now, the most vitriolic, polarizing opinions are those of individuals who hold sexist and racist ideas about who should be allowed to represent and participate in a fandom. It feels like their opinions are the loudest. But tomorrow, it'll be something else. And then something else after that. Like with religion or nationality, there is no end to the continual interpretation, to the struggle for truth and authenticity. It'll go on at least until people stop regarding something like Harry Potter or Star Trek as markers of their personal identity. Thank you for watching. If you like this and other essays on this channel, then please subscribe. You can get notified directly when our next essay comes out by turning on notifications or signing up for our email list. More importantly, consider supporting us through Patreon. Patreon is the best way to help create more and better expertise. You can find all of the relevant links in the subspace below. And check out our final chapter from Antarctica, Adventures in the Southland Part 6. Just make sure to bring a jacket. Thanks. See you soon.
Antarctica.
遠い将来を考えてみようよ。